Surely you did not mean to leave my mouth like that." Lady Cordelia Rothbury held the miniature beneath the drawing-room lamps, as though the small painted face had personally offended her. It was the evening of the 14th of May 1818, and Rothbury House in Mayfair had begun to fill with candlelight, polished silver, and people trained to make judgment sound like conversation. Georgiana Bramwell stood several feet away, with her hands folded at her waist. She had spent 6 weeks painting the portrait now resting inside an oval blue-enamel case, and she knew every measured line of it. The clear eyes, the composed brow, the firm mouth that no amount of softened pigment could make innocent without becoming false. "I painted your mouth as it is," Georgiana said. "It isn't ungraceful." Cordelia lifted her gaze. "That isn't the same as beautiful." "No." Georgiana remained calm. "It isn't." Cordelia looked back at the miniature. Her pale gold gown shimmered when she moved, and diamonds rested at her throat, with the confidence of property that had never feared being taken away. "The eyes are too narrow. They are accurate. Then widen them slightly." "I can't." "You can. You won't." Georgiana glanced at the case. Near the hinge, a crescent-shaped chip interrupted the blue enamel. She had recorded the flaw in the commission sketch when the casemaker fitted the portrait 2 days earlier. Such details mattered. A miniature passed through hands, drawers, marriages, inheritances, and sometimes accusations. "The alteration would change your expression," she said. "That is the purpose." Cordelia lowered her voice. "I want warmth in the eyes and less severity in the mouth. You asked me to paint you, not a gentler woman." The room seemed to contract around them. Lady Anne Bramwell, Georgiana's aunt and chaperone, stood near the mantel, speaking with the Earl of Rothbury. She did not turn, but Georgiana knew she had heard every word. Cordelia closed the case with a small click. "You are remarkably certain for a woman whose future commissions depend upon people liking what you make of them." The threat settled against the practical facts of Georgiana's life. Prepared ivory cost money. Pigments cost money. Frames, candles, carriage hire, and the quiet respectability that allowed a gentlewoman to earn without appearing desperate all cost money. Cordelia's circle could open a season of patronage or close it before breakfast. Georgiana had understood that when she accepted the commission, she had not understood that Cordelia expected payment to include obedience. "My future commissions depend upon people trusting that I have painted them honestly," Georgiana said. "Payment purchases the work. It doesn't purchase a different truth." "Truth," said a male voice from the doorway, "has become a very profitable word in this room." Lord Lionel Rothbury entered with the relaxed confidence of a man who had never been required to earn welcome. At 31, he possessed his sister's colouring and none of her discipline. His smile made cruelty look social. "Miss Bramwell has decided my sister's face requires moral instruction." "I have decided it requires no invention," Georgiana replied. Lionel came nearer and took the case from Cordelia without asking. He opened it, studied the miniature, and gave a short laugh. "The mouth is severe. It is composed. How fortunate that composition and severity resemble each other when one is being paid." Cordelia held out her hand, and Lionel returned the case. "I will consider whether the commission is complete," she said. "You may consider it," Georgiana answered. "The portrait is complete whether you approve of it or not." Cordelia's face changed by only a degree. That degree was enough. "Then perhaps we shall discuss your payment after dinner." "We may discuss it whenever you like." Georgiana curtsied. "The work will remain the same." Lady Anne crossed the room before Cordelia could reply. "My dear, the Earl is waiting to take us in." Her tone was pleasant, her eyes were not. Georgiana accepted the offered arm. As they moved toward the dining room, Lady Anne murmured, "You have just refused the favour of one of the most connected young women in London." "I refused to enlarge her eyes. In Mayfair, the distinction is narrow." The dining room blazed with candlelight. Portraits of dead Rothburys watched from the walls, each ancestor painted with the solemn expression of someone certain his descendants would remain solvent. Georgiana was seated well below Cordelia and Lionel, among minor relations and widowed ladies whose interest in art ended at whether it improved a drawing-room. She was a baronet's daughter, which made her respectable. She earned her living, which made her position negotiable. Several places above and across from her sat Rupert Langford, Duke of Wexborough. He wore black evening clothes, cut with severe elegance, and a signet ring upon one hand. No ornament announced what every servant, guest, and seating arrangement had already made clear. The room arranged itself around him. Georgiana had spoken with him only twice before, once when she painted his mother, Winifred Langford, Dowager Duchess of Wexborough, and once at Lady Hester Vale's exhibition the previous winter. Both conversations had been brief. Both had left her with the uneasy impression that he listened more carefully than most men spoke. Dinner began with practiced civility. Lionel discussed Parliament. Cordelia discussed the season. The Earl discussed nothing that might reveal the strain beneath House Rothbury's polish. Georgiana answered when addressed, and otherwise conserved her attention. She felt Rupert look toward her once when Cordelia praised a fashionable painter known for removing 10 years from every female sitter. Georgiana did not meet his gaze. Lionel did. By the second course, he had consumed enough wine to mistake the room's politeness for loyalty. "Miss Bramwell," he called down the table, "my sister tells me you refuse to improve her portrait." Conversations faltered. Georgiana set down her fork. "I refuse to falsify it." A delicate distinction. Lionel smiled toward the guests. Artists seem to believe honesty excuses insolence. Patrons sometimes believe money excuses vanity. Lady Anne's hand stilled beside her glass. Cordelia's smile remained perfect. Rupert's eyes did not leave Georgiana. Lionel leaned back. "And what gives you the right to judge beauty so confidently?" "Observation." "Observation? It's useful in my profession." "Then perhaps the difficulty isn't professional." His voice grew lighter, which made the malice clearer. "Perhaps a woman who has never possessed beauty herself mistakes severity for truth." The room went still. Someone near the far end lowered a glass too quickly. Georgiana felt the insult enter every waiting face. Not one person looked surprised. They looked relieved that someone had said aloud what they had all been permitted to think privately. Lionel continued, pleased by the silence. "Let us not pretend Miss Bramwell is anything but ugly." Heat rose beneath Georgiana's skin, but her hands remained steady. She could have answered anger with anger. That would have given Lionel the scene he wanted. She rose instead. Her chair made almost no sound against the carpet. Then she turned toward him and curtsied with perfect correctness. "Then I'm relieved, my lord. That truth requires no admiration from you." The silence changed. Lionel's smile thinned. Cordelia's eyes flashed. Georgiana straightened, prepared to sit, when a chair moved sharply near the head of the table. Rupert Langford stood. He did not look at Lionel. He looked only at Georgiana. "Miss Bramwell," he said, "will you marry me and become the Duchess of Wexborough?" A breath seemed to pass through the entire room at once. Cordelia's face emptied of colour. Lionel stared at Rupert as though rank itself had broken a rule. Georgiana did not move. The question was everything a woman in her position was supposed to dream of: wealth, security, a title beyond the reach of mockery. Yet it had been placed before her in the same room where she had just been insulted, while every witness waited to decide whether gratitude would overcome judgment. Rupert's gaze held hers. Beneath his composure, she saw the force of his certainty. She also saw that he had not asked whether she wished to be rescued. "Your Grace," Georgiana said, "I won't answer while Lord Lionel's insult still governs the room." Rupert's expression altered, not anger, recognition. "You're right." His voice was quieter now. "May I call upon you tomorrow?" "You may send your card," he bowed. "Then I shall." Georgiana sat. No one resumed eating for several seconds. Later, in Lady Anne's carriage, Mayfair slid past in dark windows and scattered lamps. Lady Anne looked at Georgiana across the dim interior. "He'll have to apologize beautifully." Georgiana removed one glove finger by finger. "No." She looked down at her steady hands. "He'll have to apologize honestly." Shortly after 11 the next morning, Rupert's card arrived at Upper Brook Street. Beneath his name, in a firm hand, he had written only one sentence: "I'm asking permission to apologize." Rupert Langford's apology began with the sentence Georgiana had least expected from a duke: "I was wrong." He spoke it at 12:30 on the 15th of May in Lady Anne Bramwell's drawing room. Standing several feet from Georgiana, with his hat and gloves in one hand and no certainty in the other, Lady Anne sat near the window, with a piece of embroidery resting untouched in her lap. She had granted him a quarter of an hour, and made it clear that any attempt at charm would be counted against him. Rupert waited until Georgiana indicated the chair opposite hers. "You may sit," she said. "Thank you." He did, though not with the ease of a man accustomed to entering rooms already prepared to forgive him. Georgiana had placed his card upon the table between them. The single written sentence remained visible: "I'm asking permission to apologize." "You were wrong to ask me," she said. "I was wrong to ask you as I did." His gaze stayed on hers. "Lord Lionel insulted you." I wanted to answer him in a way no one in that room could dismiss. I used the most powerful answer available to me before I considered whether it was the answer you needed. You believed a dukedom would correct what he said. I did, and now I understand that I made your humiliation the stage for my certainty. Lady Anne's needle moved once through the linen. Georgiana heard the small pull of thread. She had expected Rupert to explain his anger, his intention, or the pressure of the moment. Men of rank often treated motive as absolution. He offered none. "You gave the entire table an interest in my answer," Georgiana said. "Yes." "If I had refused, I would have appeared ungrateful." "Yes." "If I had accepted, they would have believed Lord Lionel's insult had decided for me." Rupert's jaw tightened. "Yes, you made it impossible for me to answer without becoming a lesson for someone else." "I did." The admission unsettled her more than resistance would have done. She had prepared herself to defend the obvious truth. Now she had to decide what to do with a man willing to speak it first. "Why did you ask me?" she said. "Not why did you stand? Why marriage?" Rupert glanced toward Lady Anne, then back to Georgiana. "I had intended to ask Lady Anne for permission to court you before dinner." Lady Anne lowered the embroidery. "You had?" "My secretary was preparing the note. I delayed sending it until I had confirmed Miss Bramwell had no prior attachment." Georgiana felt surprise before she could conceal it. "You made inquiries about me?" discreetly. That is often the word powerful men use when they prefer not to say intrusive. A faint expression touched his mouth and vanished. Then I made intrusive inquiries without intending harm. A narrow improvement. I will accept it. Georgiana leaned back slightly. When did you decide to court me? Not at Rothbury House. That is not a date. Last spring, when you painted my mother. She remembered Winifred Langford, Dowager Duchess of Wexborough, sitting beneath the northern window at Langford House and refusing every suggestion that age should be hidden. Rupert had entered once during the third sitting and remained no more than several minutes. You were present for 7 minutes, Georgiana said. My mother said you would remember the exact number. She was a demanding sitter. She admired you. She admired that I did not remove 10 years from her face. Other painters had removed 15. Rupert's voice softened. When the miniature arrived, she looked like herself. Not the harmless old lady several relatives preferred. Not the beauty society remembered from years earlier, herself. He paused. I asked who had painted it. After that, I noticed your work whenever it appeared. My work, Georgiana said, not me. At first, yes. The honesty stung, but she preferred it to a polished lie. And later, I heard you refuse to soften a Marquess's expression because he wished to look benevolent. At Lady Hester's exhibition, I heard you say that mercy in portraiture should reveal dignity rather than invent innocence. Georgiana studied him. You remember a great deal. I remember what changes the shape of a room. The words reached her before she could guard against them. She did not allow the feeling to show. Admiration could still turn a woman into an object placed at a flattering distance. Do you admire my principles? She asked. Or do you want me? Lady Anne's hands became still. Rupert did not answer quickly. That restraint gave the reply weight. I do not know you well enough to call what I feel love, he said. If I did, you would be right to distrust me. I admire your judgment. I desire your company. I think of what you might say before entering rooms where you are not present. I wanted permission to know you better before Lord Lionel spoke. His voice lowered. I cannot separate admiration from desire without lying about one of them. Georgiana held his gaze. And pity? No. The answer came without hesitation. I felt anger at Rothbury House. I felt shame after you answered me. I have never pitied you. You offered rescue. I offered power because power is the instrument I understand best. That does not make it harmless. No, he looked neither wounded nor defensive. It makes it my responsibility to learn another instrument. Lady Anne resumed her embroidery, though the movement of her needle had become suspiciously slow. Georgiana looked at Rupert's card again. He had not repeated the proposal. He had not asked forgiveness. He had placed uncertainty in her hands and remained seated beneath it. You may call again, she said. Something changed in his expression, though he controlled it before it became triumph. Under what conditions? There will be no announcement. Agreed. No flowers chosen to imply an engagement. Agreed. You will not speak to newspapers, hostesses, patrons, or members of your family as though I have promised anything. Agreed. You will not use your position to secure commissions for me. Rupert paused. May I introduce people to your work? You may introduce them without pressure, promises, or explanations about a future duchess. Agreed. You will not call me that. Not unless you choose it. And you will not propose again until I have given you reason to believe the answer may differ. A trace of dry humor returned to his eyes. That condition protects us both. It is intended to. Rupert rested one hand upon the arm of the chair. His signet ring caught the light. Then I have one request. You are in a poor position to make one. That may improve the request. He glanced toward the rear of the house, where Georgiana's studio lay beyond the adjoining rooms. Accept a commission from me. A portrait? A miniature. Why? Because you have asked whether I want you or admire what you represent. I cannot answer honestly after 2 brief conversations and 1 disastrous dinner. And sitting for me will answer it. It may answer something more useful. His mouth curved faintly. Whether you see a man worth considering once the title is removed from the composition. Lady Anne made a soft sound that might have been approval. Georgiana ignored it. My fee is 3 guineas. I had expected rank to cost more. Rank usually requires less accuracy. Then 3 guineas. You will sit when the light is suitable. I shall attempt to persuade Parliament that daylight governs my schedule. Parliament has endured greater disappointments. Saturday at 2? Yes. Lady Anne present. Within sight or hearing at all times. Naturally. Georgiana extended no hand. Neither did he. The agreement remained where it belonged, in words clearly spoken. Rupert rose when Lady Anne did. At the door, he paused. Miss Bramwell. Your Grace, thank you for allowing me to begin again. You have been allowed to call again, she said. The beginning has not yet been decided. His smile held no victory. Then I will not mistake permission for success. After he left, the drawing room seemed unexpectedly quiet. Lady Anne watched the closed door. He apologizes better than most men propose. The comparison is not difficult. Do you believe him? Georgiana folded Rupert's card once more. I believe he regrets the manner. That was not my question. Georgiana carried the card to the studio at the back of the house. Afternoon light lay evenly across the work table. Her walnut paint box stood beside prepared ivory leaves, clean brushes, and 2 small frames waiting for delivery. She opened the lower compartment and removed a narrow packet wrapped in faded velvet. Inside lay the unfinished miniature her mother had begun 11 years earlier. Georgiana's painted eyes looked out from the ivory. Below them, the face dissolved into pale guide marks. There was no completed mouth, no settled cheek, no decision about the woman those eyes belonged to. Lady Anne remained near the open connecting door. Why do you keep it among your working things? She asked. Georgiana touched the edge of the ivory without lifting it. Because I once believed I would finish it. And now? Now I can see what is false in everyone else's portrait. She looked at the unfinished face. I do not know whether I could recognize it in my own. On the desk beside her, she opened the commission ledger and wrote in a clear hand, Saturday, 2 o'clock. Rupert Langford, Duke of Wexborough, 1 miniature. 3 guineas, not a promise. Not an engagement. A man asking to be seen. The first thing Georgiana asked the Duke of Wexborough to remove was not his coat, but his name. Rupert arrived at Upper Brook Street at precisely 2 o'clock on Saturday the 16th of May, and Lady Anne's mantel clock had scarcely finished striking when the footman showed him into the studio. The north-facing room was modest, orderly, and brighter than the drawing room at the front of the house. Prepared ivory leaves rested beneath clean cloth. Brushes lay in careful rows beside Georgiana's walnut paint box. A straight-backed chair stood on a low platform near the window, positioned so daylight would fall evenly across the left side of Rupert's face. Lady Anne occupied the writing table in the adjoining room. The connecting door remained fully open. Your Grace has discovered punctuality, she said, without looking up from her correspondence. I was told the light wouldn't wait for Parliament, Rupert replied. It won't, Georgiana said. Sit before it changes. He obeyed. His dark coat was restrained by ducal standards. But the signet ring on his right hand caught the light before she had properly studied his expression. Georgiana stood behind the easel and looked at him for several seconds. "Remove the ring, please." Rupert glanced down at it. "Have I lost the title already?" "Only inside the composition. That sounds temporary enough to survive." He pulled the ring free and placed it on the small table beside him. Georgiana continued to examine him. "Your collar is too formal. I had believed collars existed for that purpose. Loosen the upper button of your coat." Rupert looked toward Lady Anne. "I've been given strict instructions not to become interesting." "The door is open," Lady Anne said, "and Miss Bramwell appears more concerned with your posture than your virtue." Rupert loosened the button. The line of the coat softened at once, without the signet ring and rigid collar. He looked less like a figure intended for a stateroom and more like a man who might speak before, considering how much authority the room would grant him. Georgiana began with quick pencil lines, fixing the angle of his head, the strength of his jaw, and the distance between brow and mouth. Most sitters feared silence. They attempted to improve themselves through conversation, as though an amusing story could alter the shape of a cheek. Rupert endured nearly 4 minutes before his mouth shifted. "Do artists always frown while working?" he asked. "Only when the subject moves." "I haven't moved. Your mouth has. It does that when I'm thinking. Then think less. You ask a great deal for 3 guineas. Georgiana glanced over the easel. "You use humor whenever the room becomes quiet." "Do I? You do. Perhaps I'm trying to be agreeable." "No, you're trying not to be examined." The amusement faded by a degree. Georgiana caught the change before he could replace it and marked the new line near the corner of his mouth. "Is that what you see?" he asked. "At present." "And what will you paint? What remains after you become tired of arranging what I am allowed to notice?" Lady Anne turned a page in the adjoining room. Rupert looked back toward the window. "My mother said you were patient." The Dowager Duchess was an excellent sitter. She said, "Your patience became merciless when it outlasted pretense." Your mother is perceptive. That quality is inconvenient in a parent. Georgiana made a second, smaller pencil study of his head and shoulders. This one was not intended for display. It existed only to help her understand proportion before color narrowed every decision. The loosened collar changed the pose. Wit remained at the mouth. Caution remained in the eyes. Beneath both lay something more difficult to define. A tenderness so carefully guarded that most observers would mistake its concealment for coldness. When the study was complete, Georgiana placed it at the edge of a leather delivery portfolio near the side table, where the graphite could settle without being touched. "You are less pleased with that one," Rupert said. "It is a study." That didn't answer me. A study is permitted to be uncertain. "And the artist?" Georgiana opened the lower compartment of her walnut paint box to retrieve an ivory holder. The faded velvet packet inside shifted, exposing one painted eye. Rupert saw it. He looked away immediately. "I won't ask." The restraint unsettled her more than curiosity would have done. She could have closed the compartment and allowed the moment to pass. Instead, Georgiana lifted the packet and unwrapped it upon the table. The unfinished miniature showed only her eyes and the beginnings of the brow. Below them, pale guide marks suggested a cheek and mouth that had never been completed. Rupert did not reach for it. "It's you," he said. "At 18, your work, my mother's." His gaze moved from the painted eyes to Georgiana's face. Why did she stop? She died before the next sitting. He offered no polished condolence. He waited, and the silence was kinder than words chosen merely because grief required them. She always began with the eyes, Georgiana said. She believed they revealed the sitter before vanity had time to interfere. Why haven't you finished it? I tried. What happened? Georgiana looked at the pale space where her mouth should have been. Every face I drew looked borrowed. One was softer because society prefers softness. Another was younger because age is treated as an error in women. One was almost pretty, almost, by fashionable measure, and none was true. I didn't know which truth belonged to me. Rupert remained very still. Without ring or formal posture, he looked less like a duke receiving a confidence, and more like a man afraid to damage it. Then perhaps you don't need to finish it yet, he said. Georgiana had expected encouragement. His refusal to press felt gentler. You think leaving it incomplete is wise. No, I think unfinished doesn't mean unworthy of being seen. Something tightened behind her ribs. She rapped the ivory again before he could observe how deeply the sentence had entered. When the sitting ended, Rupert replaced his signet ring but did not immediately recover the authority that came with it. At the door, he looked back toward the easel. Have I survived the first examination? You remained still for nearly 12 consecutive minutes. A triumph, a beginning. His expression warmed. I won't mistake it for success. After he left, a household errand boy came for the delivery portfolio that was to go to Mr. Carrow's workshop the following week. Georgiana closed the leather cover without noticing that the quick practice study still rested near its outer edge. A week later, on the 23rd of May, Rupert returned for a second sitting. The afternoon light was less generous, and Georgiana had barely begun mixing the first flesh tones when a messenger arrived from Rothbury House. Lady Anne received the sealed note and carried it into the studio. The Rothbury crest marked the wax. Georgiana broke it. Cordelia's message was concise. The miniature would be collected the next morning, so Georgiana could widen the eyes and soften the mouth. Payment would remain withheld until the requested alterations were completed. Rupert watched her read. Lady Cordelia? Yes. What does she want? A different face. Georgiana crossed to the writing desk and took out a clean sheet. She wrote 3 lines. The portrait was complete. She would not alter it. Lady Cordelia might withhold payment if truth had become too expensive. Georgiana sanded the ink, folded the note, and gave it to the waiting messenger. When the door closed, Rupert said, That refusal may cost you several commissions. I know, and you are not afraid. Of course I'm afraid. She returned to the easel. Courage is not the absence of an account book. His gaze rested on her with an attention that did not flatter, and therefore could not be dismissed. You speak of truth as though it always protects the person telling it. It rarely does. Then why insist upon it? Georgiana lifted her brush, because a lie purchased today becomes an obligation tomorrow. Across Mayfair, Cordelia read Georgiana's refusal before the messenger had fully recovered from the return journey. Lionel stood beside the fireplace at Rothbury House, one hand resting on the mantel. She won't alter it, Cordelia said. No. And you find that amusing? I find it useful. Lionel looked toward the blue enamel case lying closed upon her dressing table. Near the hinge, the crescent-shaped chip caught the afternoon light. If Miss Bramwell won't change your portrait, he said, we'll change the portrait London has of hers. By the evening of the 25th of May, Lady Hester Vale's drawing room had become the sort of place where artists were praised, patrons were flattered, and everyone pretended not to notice which of the two required the other more. Miniatures, engraving proofs, and small landscapes stood beneath the candlelight on temporary easels. Lady Hester moved among them with a collector's confidence and the freedom of a widow who no longer needed to soften an opinion before offering it. Georgiana attended with Lady Anne in a gown of deep green silk, plain enough to avoid competition and rich enough to protect her from pity. She had expected Cordelia to ignore her after the refusal to alter the portrait. Instead, Lady Cordelia entered carrying the oval blue-enamel case in one gloved hand. The crescent-shaped chip near the hinge caught the light when she crossed the room. Rupert arrived several minutes later. He greeted Lady Anne first, then bowed to Georgiana with no public intimacy beyond what their agreement allowed. His signet ring remained upon his hand, but he made no attempt to use rank as conversation. "You are examining the room," he said. "It has not yet earned a verdict. Should I remain silent until it does, that would improve your chances. I begin to suspect 3 guineas purchased less mercy than I was promised." The warmth at the corner of his mouth almost drew a smile from her. Almost. Lady Hester approached before Georgiana could answer. "Miss Bramwell, I have been waiting to see whether Lady Cordelia's miniature survived your honesty." "It survived," Cordelia said from behind them. The conversations nearest the mantel faded as she joined the group with Lionel at her side. She opened the case and displayed the portrait as though producing evidence against its maker. The painted Cordelia looked beautiful, composed, and unmistakably firm. Her eyes were clear rather than enlarged. Her mouth held the severity she had demanded Georgiana soften. Lady Hester leaned nearer. "Excellent." Cordelia's smile remained fixed. "You do not find it lacking imagination? I find it lacking dishonesty. Then perhaps collectors confuse the two more often than artists admit." Lionel stepped in with a social ease sharpened by malice. "Miss Bramwell refused every alteration my sister requested." "How brave of her," Lady Hester said. "Or obstinate," Cordelia replied. She turned toward Georgiana, making the challenge public without raising her voice. "I asked only for a little more warmth in the eyes and less severity in the mouth. Surely an artist should be capable of making a beautiful subject more beautiful." Several guests shifted closer. Georgiana saw their expectation move toward Rupert. They remembered Rothbury House. They wanted to see whether the Duke would once again turn her defense into a spectacle. Rupert remained still. The restraint cost him. She saw it in the slight tightening of his hand around the stem of his glass. Cordelia saw it too, and mistook it for uncertainty. "Perhaps Miss Bramwell lacks imagination," she continued. "Some women become so devoted to truth that they forget beauty requires generosity." Georgiana met her gaze. "Imagination creates art. Vanity requests forgery." The words moved through the group with greater force because they were not shouted. A gentleman near the fireplace looked down at his glass. Lady Hester smiled openly. Cordelia's fingers tightened around the blue case. "You speak as though truth were always kind." "It is not," Georgiana said, "but kindness that depends upon falsehood becomes cruelty the moment the truth appears." Lionel laughed softly. "Miss Bramwell has built an entire profession upon making patrons uncomfortable." "That may explain why you have never commissioned her," Rupert said. His tone remained light enough to preserve manners. The room understood the edge beneath it. Lionel turned toward him. "Your Grace appears easily impressed." "Not easily. That is what makes the experience worth noting." A few guests hid smiles. Rupert did not continue. He had closed Lionel's path only when the insult became personal and he had not taken Georgiana's place. She felt the difference. Cordelia looked from Rupert to Georgiana. Something unguarded crossed her face. It was not vanity alone. Fear moved beneath the polish. Georgiana had seen that expression in sitters who believed a portrait might reveal what their jewels concealed. Lady Hester redirected the company toward an engraving from Bath, and the crowd dispersed with reluctant obedience. Cordelia closed the case. For one moment, her thumb rested over the crescent chip as though she could cover every flaw by force. Later, supper was served at small tables rather than formally. Lady Anne and Lady Hester became absorbed in an argument about Italian engraving, leaving Georgiana and Rupert near a cabinet of bronzes within full view of the room. "You allowed me to answer," Georgiana said. Rupert looked at her. "You sound surprised. At Rothbury House, you answered before anyone could breathe. I am trying to improve. A dangerous ambition for a duke. My mother has attempted it for 36 years. Georgiana looked across the room. Cordelia stood beside an elderly baron, listening while he praised the portrait she had just insulted. The baron's interest rested less on the painting than on the Rothbury name. Her anger is not only vanity, Georgiana said. Rupert followed her gaze. No, House Rothbury is in difficulty. His attention sharpened. Who told you? No one. Lord Lionel talks too loudly about creditors. Lady Cordelia speaks too carefully about security. Their father has avoided the same gentleman all evening. Rupert's mouth lost its amusement. The estates are burdened. Lionel put money into 2 ventures that failed. Several creditors remain patient because the family name still persuades them patience may be rewarded. And Cordelia, she has been raised to believe a favorable marriage is the family's last valuable asset. Georgiana watched Cordelia turn her face toward the baron with practiced warmth. Then beauty is not merely vanity to her. It is property. Yes. And your interest in me has reduced its value. Rupert looked at Georgiana rather than at Cordelia. My interest in you is not a market correction. It will be treated as one. He was silent for a moment. Do you pity her? I understand her. Georgiana folded her hands before her. That does not make her harmless. You could have humiliated her more thoroughly. I had no wish to become Lord Lionel with better grammar. Rupert's laugh escaped before he could restrain it. 2 nearby guests glanced over. Georgiana felt an unexpected warmth at having broken his composure. You are dangerous, he said quietly. Because I answered a question. Because you make restraint feel less honorable than honesty. Restraint is honorable when it protects another person, less so when it protects only pride. His gaze settled on her face. It did not search for hidden beauty he could announce and thereby claim. He simply looked. Your refusal to flatter me, he said, is one reason I continue returning. I have not yet begun your miniature in color. You may still dislike what I see. I doubt that. That sounds like vanity. No, it sounds like trust in the artist. The answer reached her more deeply than praise would have done. Georgiana looked away first. Near midnight, the Earl of Rothbury placed a sheet of figures upon Lionel's desk in the family library. The candles had burned low, leaving the columns of debt stark beneath the yellow light. This account must be settled before the end of the season, the Earl said. If Bellamont calls the note, the others may follow. Lionel scanned the total without surprise. He will wait if Wexborough lends us public support. The Duke has offered none. He might have if Cordelia had remained the obvious choice. The Earl's expression hardened. Your sister was never promised to him. No, she was merely the most useful woman in London until Miss Bramwell became interesting. Cordelia stood near the window, still wearing the pale gold satin from Lady Hester's supper. The blue-enamel case rested open in her hand. Her painted likeness watched her with the firmness she despised because she recognized it. "She made me look hard," Cordelia said. "She made you look formidable," Lionel replied. "Men admire beauty. They do not marry a woman who appears determined to govern them." The Earl folded the account sheet. "Enough. I will not hear your sister discussed like a net nest parcel." Yet the shame in Cordelia's face said she had been discussed that way all her life, only with gentler words. The Earl left them with the figures still on the desk. Cordelia crossed to the lamp. Using the tip of a small ivory tool, she eased the portrait plaque from its fitted rim. The movement was careful. She did not damage the painting. She wrapped it in pale blue linen and placed it beside the empty case. "You said you would make her stop being believed," she said. "I will. I don't want the portrait destroyed. It won't be, and I don't want to know the rest." Lionel looked at her. "That is the privilege of people who give permission and prefer not to witness the method." Cordelia's hand tightened around the linen packet. "I gave no permission to ruin her. No, you only asked that truth become expensive." For several seconds, she did not release either object. Then she placed the empty case and the wrapped portrait into Lionel's hands. He slid the linen packet inside his coat first, then the case. The crescent-shaped chip flashed once beneath the lamp before the blue enamel disappeared. "What will you do?" Cordelia asked. Lionel buttoned his coat. "Give London a portrait it will prefer." He left the library carrying both the true likeness and the empty case, while Cordelia remained beside the desk with her father's debts spread open before her. The Rothbury crest appeared beneath the old blue velvet before Elias Reed had lifted more than the width of his smallest finger. He stopped with the narrow blade still resting against the inner rim of the oval case. Morning light entered the shared workroom near Fleet Street through a soot-clouded window, falling across scattered frame moldings, ivory scraps, copper plates, and a pot of glue beginning to skin over. Mr. Edmund Mercer owned most of the room. Mr. Caro rented one bench near the rear for frame and case work, and Elias, Caro's 17-year-old apprentice, had been sent there that morning to replace a damaged lining. Lord Lionel Rothbury stood beside the central table with one gloved hand resting near a heavy purse. "Why have you stopped?" he asked. Elias looked from the stamped metal to the crescent-shaped chip at the hinge. A stag beneath 3 stars had been pressed into the silvered shell. "This case belongs to House Rothbury, my lord. It belonged to someone who no longer requires the mark to be visible." Lionel's tone made ownership sound temporary and obedience inevitable. Across the bench, Mercer unfolded a quick pencil study of Rupert Langford. The Duke's head was turned toward an unseen window, his coat collar loosened by a single button. One corner of the sheet bore a dirty crease. "This is unfinished," Mercer said. "The graphite is loose, and the mouth has barely been settled. The face is recognizable. To people who know him, everyone in London believes they know him." Mercer held the paper closer to the light. "Where did you get it?" Lionel smiled. Miss Bramwell was careless with a delivery portfolio. An errand boy on his way to Caro's workshop found reason to become more careless. Elias understood then. The portfolio that had arrived 3 days earlier had contained frame measurements and workshop notes. He had not seen the drawing among them, but he remembered the boy leaving too quickly and refusing the kitchen ale usually offered after an errand. Lionel opened a pale blue linen packet and placed Cordelia's legitimate portrait plaque beside the study. Her painted eyes were clear. Her mouth was firm. Even in the weak light, the likeness possessed a dignity the living woman had called severity. "This remains untouched," Lionel said. Mercer glanced at the purse. "And what replaces it?" Lionel turned the practice study toward him. His Grace as Miss Bramwell might have seen him in a room no respectable, unmarried woman should have entered. Mercer's expression tightened. "The collar is hardly scandalous. Then remove the cravat. Open the coat. Change the daylight to lamplight. People will supply whatever impropriety the paint only suggests. You want a counterfeit, miniature. I want an image London will believe before it asks who painted it." Lionel touched the reverse side of a blank ivory plaque. On the back, "Paint Miss Bramwell as society described her after my dinner. Lengthen the nose. Broaden the mouth. Make the chin heavy." He unfolded a rough design bearing the words "His Grace's chosen beauty." The same image goes onto a copper plate. Mercer did not touch the purse at once. "I'm a miniaturist, not a printer of gutter ridicule." "You're a miniaturist whose rent is overdue." The coins settled when Lionel pushed them nearer. "And Mr. Carow is owed for 2 Rothbury frames. Both men in this room have discovered that principals are expensive." Elias lowered his gaze to the case. "My lord, if the crest is hidden and the portrait removed, anyone who finds this may think it has no connection to your family." Lionel looked at him. "You have understood the instruction." "I didn't say I agreed with it." Mercer's head lifted sharply. Lionel's smile thinned. "Agreement is not one of the skills for which Mr. Carow pays you." Elias pressed the blade beneath the remaining velvet. The old lining came away in narrow strips, exposing the full crest. "Should I repair the enamel as well?" he asked. "No," Lionel answered too quickly, then moderated his tone. "The damage makes it look used. Leave it." Elias cut black velvet to the shape of the inner shell. His fingers remained steady, because years of apprenticeship had trained them to work even when his thoughts did not. Near the clasp, the metal curved slightly. The new lining refused to settle completely into the corner. He reached for more adhesive. Lionel took the case from him. "It will serve. That edge may lift. Then no one should lift it." Mercer had begun tracing Rupert's profile onto prepared ivory. "And the parcel?" he asked without looking up. Lionel drew a small card from his coat. "Georgiana Bramwell, Upper Brook Street," had been copied in a careful hand. "A carrier's assistant named Samuel Pike will add 1 small parcel to her manifest. That is all you need to know." Elias heard the name clearly. He also heard what Lionel did not say. The false image was not intended merely for gossip. It was meant to appear among Georgiana's own work. "She could lose every patron she has," Elias said. Lionel turned. "Carow sent you here to line a case." "He didn't send me to help ruin a woman." The room became very quiet. Mercer's burin slipped across the copper plate, cutting a small break into the lower border of the design. He muttered under his breath. Lionel glanced at the floor. "Leave it." Mercer frowned. "It will show on every copy. Then every copy will resemble the proof." Lionel moved nearer to Elias. "Mr. Carow depends upon payments from houses such as mine. If I tell him you damaged a valuable case and questioned a client's instructions, he will decide whether 1 apprentice is worth the loss of several commissions. You can't dismiss me." "No." Lionel's voice remained almost pleasant. "I can make certain the man who can does so." By the following evening, Carow had called Elias to the rear of his workshop and spoken without meeting his eyes. Rothbury payment had been withheld. 2 promised frames had been cancelled. Caro had a wife, 3 younger children, and no appetite for a noble family's displeasure. Elias was told to leave his apron and return only if another master requested his reference. No reference was offered. On the morning of the 1st of June, Georgiana found him outside Master Bell's framing shop near Bond Street. She had come with Lady Anne to collect 2 frames for her Somerset House submission. Elias's coat had been brushed clean, but his boots were worn and his folded apron remained beneath one arm. He stood before the window, watching Master Bell's apprentices lay gold leaf along a carved border. "Mr. Reed," Georgiana said. He turned sharply. "Miss Bramwell, you worked for Mr. Caro." "Not now. Were you dismissed?" His gaze fell. "He said there wasn't enough work. Do you believe that?" Elias looked through the glass. "It doesn't matter what I believe." Georgiana studied him. Fear sat beneath the shame. She recognized the posture of someone who had been told that truth would only deepen the cost. "Master Bell needs another apprentice," she said. "He won't take me without a reference. Then he must judge your hands instead. You don't know what happened." "No." She opened the shop door. "That is why I won't pretend an accusation is proof." Elias stared after her. 10 minutes later, Master Bell came outside and questioned him about wood grain, mitred joints, gesso, lining paste, and the proper preparation for gilding. The first answer stumbled. Skill steadied the next 5. Master Bell folded his arms. "1 week on trial. You arrive before 7. If you lie, you leave. If you make a mistake and conceal it, you leave. If you make one and tell me, we correct it." Relief altered Elias's whole face. "Thank you, sir. Thank Miss Bramwell. She interrupted my breakfast." Georgiana looked away to spare the boy embarrassment. "I only opened the door." "Why?" Elias asked. "Because one accusation doesn't make every accusation true." The words struck him. For a moment, he seemed close to speaking. Then a carriage stopped at the curb, and Rupert descended. He greeted Lady Anne, Georgiana, and Master Bell before noticing Elias enter the shop. "Another commission?" he asked. "Another apprentice." Rupert looked toward the waiting frames. "Lady Cordelia still hasn't paid you." Georgiana's expression cooled. "How do you know?" "Rothbury debts are discussed too freely by men who wish to be paid. Let me replace the fee." "No." "Because it would feel like payment for something else." "Because I completed Lady Cordelia's portrait. Her refusal is her dishonor, not your debt." Rupert accepted the boundary without argument. "Then allow me to introduce patrons who pay artists without purchasing obedience." "Introductions aren't compensation." "No, they're doors. You decide whether to enter." Georgiana considered him. "No promises on my behalf." "None. No mention of a future duchess." "You haven't agreed to become one." "Precisely." A small smile touched Rupert's mouth. "Then I shall introduce Miss Bramwell, whose work deserves attention, and whose refusals are ruinously expensive." Georgiana tried not to smile and failed by a degree. Across London that afternoon, Samuel Pike stood behind a carrier's warehouse while Lionel handed him a duplicate label bearing Georgiana's name and a sealed purse containing half his payment. "The parcel will arrive before the 4th, Lionel said. "You'll place it with her delivery and add one small item to the manifest." Pike slipped the label into his coat. "And if the clerk notices, he'll see your initials and assume you counted badly." Lionel turned away. "By the time anyone counts again, Miss Bramwell will have greater concerns." On the afternoon of the 3rd of June, Georgiana placed the final touch beneath Rupert Langford's lower lip and understood that finishing his portrait had done nothing to simplify the man. The north-facing light lay steady across the studio. Lady Anne sat at the writing table in the adjoining room with the connecting door open, sorting invitations into 3 piles according to whether they deserved acceptance, refusal, or fire. Rupert occupied the straight-backed chair near the window. His signet ring rested on the small table beside him, removed now without discussion, and the upper button of his coat remained loosened enough to keep the collar from turning him into a monument. Georgiana lifted the miniature closer to the light. The face on the ivory was restrained without being cold. Wit lingered at the mouth. Caution remained in the eyes. Beneath both, she had painted the suggestion of a tenderness he guarded so carefully that most people would mistake its concealment for strength. "You have been staring at that portrait longer than you stared at me," Rupert said. "The portrait is easier to keep still, a criticism I shall carry into Parliament. Parliament may be the only place where movement improves silence." Lady Anne turned a page, though Georgiana suspected she had not read the first one. Georgiana set down her finest brush. "It is complete." Rupert rose, but waited until she held out the ivory before approaching. He accepted it by the edges. For several moments, he said nothing. His attention moved over the painted face, as though he were seeing an argument he had not known she was making. "You left out the title," he said. "You removed the ring. At your command. At my request. It did not feel optional. You were free to refuse. And remain forever ignorant of what Miss Bramwell thinks I look like. Without power in the room, I was never free." Georgiana felt the smile threaten and restrained it. Rupert looked again at the miniature. "I recognize this man. That is generally considered useful in a likeness. Not always. Official portraits often make a man recognizable to his descendants and invisible to himself." He raised his gaze. "You made me look amused. You are often amused. Rarely when anyone is painting. Me. Most painters are afraid amusement will reduce dignity. And you are not? Dignity that cannot survive a smile is poorly constructed." Lady Anne made a soft sound that might have been approval. Rupert returned the miniature to Georgiana. "May I ask whether this sitting has served its purpose?" Georgiana placed the ivory in the drying stand. "You wished to be painted. That was one purpose. You have been painted. The other was to let you decide whether the man was worth considering once the Duke was removed from the composition." The room became quieter. Georgiana had known the question would come. She had prepared several cautious answers, each of them reasonable and none honest enough. Rupert stood without ring or formal posture. He did not step closer. He did not use the silence to press her. "You are worth considering," she said. Hope moved across his face before discipline concealed it. "That is not quite an answer." "No. May I ask when I might receive one?" Georgiana folded her hands before her. "After the Somerset House review." His expression sharpened. "Why after?" "Because I want one judgment to belong entirely to my work before London decides every future success came from your interest. I have not spoken to the committee. I know. I will not. I know that too. Then what are you afraid of?" His tone held no challenge. That made the truth harder to avoid. "If I accept you now, every patron who looks at my miniatures may wonder whether they admire the work or fear offending a future duchess." Rupert glanced toward the drying portrait, then back to her. "They may wonder regardless." "Yes, but if the work is accepted and judged before I give you an answer, then the first decision remains mine." Lady Anne had stopped sorting invitations. Rupert paced one measured step toward the window, then halted. Georgiana saw the impulse in him before he spoke. A recommendation, a private word, a carefully arranged assurance that no one would know had come from him. Power offering to disguise itself as fairness, he rejected it. "You want the review untouched by me," he said, "entirely, even if I could help without anyone knowing, especially then." His jaw tightened. "Very well, that sounded painful. It is. I have spent most of my life believing power becomes moral when used for the correct purpose. And now I suspect the person affected should be permitted to define correct." Georgiana looked at him more carefully. "That is progress. You say it as though rewarding a child for not overturning the tea tray. A duke who learns restraint deserves encouragement wherever it can be found." Rupert laughed. This time the sound did not protect him from being seen. It revealed relief, anxiety, and something warmer beneath both. "Then I shall ask only this," he said. "Can you imagine accepting me after the review?" The question entered the room without rank, spectacle, or witnesses waiting to judge gratitude. Lady Anne remained present, but she was no audience. Georgiana could have delayed. She could have hidden inside caution and called it wisdom. Instead, she chose the narrow truth. "Yes," she said, "I can imagine it." Rupert's breath changed. He did not approach. "Then I will wait. There is no engagement, no ring. I brought none. No announcement. None. No promises made for me. Only one promise made to you." Georgiana raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "I won't influence the review." She searched his face for wit and found none. "Thank you." Rupert glanced toward the drying miniature. "When may I collect it?" "The colors need 2 days to settle." "Friday afternoon. I shall come at 4. You may send a servant." "I may. I won't." Lady Anne rose before the intimacy of the exchange could deepen beyond propriety. Rupert replaced his signet ring. The title returned to him by habit and expectation. But the painted face on Georgiana's table remained without it. Before leaving, he paused at the studio door. "Whatever the committee decides, it won't alter what I see. That is precisely why I need their judgment to belong to me." Rupert inclined his head. "I understand." Georgiana believed he did. The following morning, the 4th of June, a trusted carrier arrived at Upper Brook Street shortly after 9. Georgiana supervised every parcel herself. 3 framed miniatures were wrapped in clean paper and tied with her narrow grey studio ribbon. Each bore her small painted monogram. The leather portfolio held studies and supporting papers. A separate box contained display fittings. Lady Anne stood beside the hall table while the carrier clerk checked each item against the list. 3 framed miniatures, he said. 1 portfolio, 1 small box. "Correct," Georgiana replied. "Nothing else is to be added after it leaves this house." "No, miss." She watched the cart depart toward the carrier yard and felt an unease she could not name. It was not fear of rejection. Rejection would wound, but it would at least be honest. At the carrier yard, Samuel Pike waited until the clerk turned toward another delivery. A small parcel rested beneath his arm, wrapped in brown paper and bearing a duplicate label with Georgiana Bramwell's name and Upper Brook Street direction. The imitation of her hand was careful. What it lacked was the grey ribbon and painted monogram. Pike placed it beside her legitimate packages, opened the manifest, and added 1 line beneath the clerk's entry. 1 small parcel. He marked the addition with his initials. The parcel contained the blue-enamel case, now lined with black velvet, the counterfeit miniature closed inside. By noon, the cart was on its way to Somerset House. At Rothbury House, Cordelia stood near the breakfast-room window while her maid arranged letters upon a salver. "His Grace has completed another sitting," the maid said too casually. Cordelia looked up. How would you know that? Mrs. Pike's sister works in a house near Upper Brook Street, she heard. His Grace is to return after the exhibition review. The information was ordinary enough to be harmless. Cordelia made it dangerous by filling in what had not been said. Multiple sittings, a return after the review. No public announcement yet. Georgiana had not refused him. Did she hear an acceptance? Cordelia asked. No, my lady. Then she heard nothing. Yet the answer did not quiet her. Lionel entered before she could ask more. Cordelia dismissed the maid and waited until the door closed. He means to return after Somerset House. Lionel adjusted one cuff. Who told you? A servant heard it. Did she hear Miss Bramwell accept him? No. Then you know nothing. Cordelia turned toward the window. I know he has gone back again and again. I know Miss Bramwell asked for time. I know what comes after time when a duke is determined. Lionel's expression remained calm. Then it is fortunate we did not wait for certainty. Cordelia faced him. The parcel has gone? It entered Miss Bramwell's manifest this morning. Her face lost color, and if the case is traced to me, it was stolen. No one was told. You were protecting your privacy. And the portrait? Safe. Where? Somewhere no one will look unless they already know whom to suspect. Cordelia looked toward the empty place on her dressing table where the blue case had once rested. You said you would change the way London saw her. I will. Lionel's tone held no triumph, only the cold patience of a man who believed events had finally begun obeying him. By the time His Grace returns for his answer, London will believe Miss Bramwell has already taken liberties no respectable woman could admit. Cordelia said nothing. Somewhere between Upper Brook Street and Somerset House, the false parcel rode beside Georgiana's legitimate work, carrying her name toward a scandal she had not yet imagined. The first sign that something was wrong was the absence of a grey ribbon. On the 7th of June, the private review rooms at Somerset House held the low, careful murmur of artists, patrons, and committee members pretending that merit alone governed every decision. Georgiana stood beside Lady Anne near the wall, where 3 of her miniatures had been placed beneath her own name. For several precious minutes, the site belonged entirely to her. No engagement had been announced. No recommendation had been whispered by Rupert. The work had reached the room before any promise of marriage. And the judgment was its own. Across the gallery, Rupert spoke with an elderly collector. The miniature Georgiana had painted of him rested in a velvet-lined case inside his coat. He had collected it on the 5th June in Lady Anne's presence, paid the agreed 3 guineas without argument, and studied the likeness for so long that Georgiana had finally asked whether he intended to find a second face beneath the first. He had replied, I'm trying to understand why I look more honest without my title. Now he caught her eye and crossed to her. Your work survived without my assistance, he said, a triumph for both of us. You appear disappointed, only deprived of the pleasure of being useful. You may congratulate the committee for resisting you. I would, but they might suspect I influenced their resistance. A smile had barely touched her mouth when Mr. Alderton called her name from the delivery table. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. Something in it emptied the warmth from the room. Georgiana crossed to him with Lady Anne beside her, and Rupert several steps behind. On the green baize lay her carrier manifest, the parcel list checked at Upper Brook Street, and a small package wrapped in brown paper. Her name had been copied onto the label in an imitation of her hand. There was no narrow grey studio ribbon. There was no painted monogram. Miss Bramwell, Mr. Alderton said. "This item appears beneath your delivery on the carrier's manifest, but it does not match the wrappings of your other work." He pointed to the final line. One small parcel had been added below the clerk's original entries. Beside it stood the initials, S.P. Georgiana looked at the parcel and felt the room begin to change around her. "It did not leave my house." "You are certain?" "I supervised every item. 3 framed miniatures, 1 portfolio, and 1 box of display fittings. Each was tied with grey ribbon or marked with my monogram." One of the committee members leaned closer. "Then it must be opened before witnesses." The conversations behind them had already faded. People moved nearer while pretending not to. Mr. Alderton untied the string and folded back the brown paper. An oval blue-enamel case lay inside. Its hinge faced away from Georgiana. For one instant, she saw only the color and shape. Recognition stirred, but did not yet settle. Mr. Alderton opened the lid. The miniature inside showed Rupert in a room painted to resemble lamplight. His cravat had been removed. His coat lay open farther than propriety would permit in any professional sitting. The face came from Georgiana's hand, or almost did. The angle belonged to a quick study she had once made. The expression did not. Someone had altered his restraint into private expectation. The image suggested an access no unmarried gentlewoman could admit without surrendering her reputation. Georgiana stopped breathing. Mr. Alderton turned the ivory plaque. On the reverse, someone had painted a caricature of her. The nose was lengthened, the mouth broadened, and the chin made heavy. Beneath it ran the words, "His Grace's chosen beauty." A short laugh escaped from somewhere behind the first rank of guests. It ended quickly, but not before Georgiana heard the pleasure inside it. A patron, who had praised her work moments earlier, drew a folded commission card from his pocket, looked at it, and slipped it back without approaching her. One lady studied the painted Rupert, then Georgiana's face, then the line of Rupert's collar, as though deciding which version of intimacy she preferred. Rupert stepped to the table. His expression had become dangerously still. He looked at the counterfeit, then at Georgiana. "This isn't Miss Bramwell's work," he said. His voice carried through the room. "No one here will suggest otherwise." Cordelia appeared from the gathering crowd with Lionel at her side. She wore pale blue and the composure of a woman forced to endure another person's vulgarity, her gaze fixed upon the enamel case. That case was stolen from Rothbury House. Georgiana turned toward her. "Stolen? It held the miniature you painted of me." Cordelia touched one hand to her throat. "It disappeared after Lady Hester's supper. We chose not to make the loss public." Lionel looked around the room before answering the question no one had yet asked. "My sister wished to spare Miss Bramwell embarrassment. It seems that generosity was misplaced." Lady Anne moved closer to Georgiana. The parcel did not leave Upper Brook Street with her submission. "Then perhaps Miss Bramwell arranged for it to enter elsewhere," Lionel said. "She has painted His Grace in private. He has asked for her hand in public. Now an intimate likeness appears among her exhibition work. One might conclude that scandal was meant to increase both the price of her miniatures and the urgency of his proposal." Rupert's gaze turned toward him. "You'll withdraw that accusation? Because it's false, or because your Grace dislikes hearing it? Because Miss Bramwell did not make this?" Lionel smiled. "A duke's preference isn't evidence." Before Rupert could answer, a footman entered carrying several printed sheets. "Mr. Alderton, these are being distributed near the Strand entrance." Mr. Alderton took the top handbill. The same caricature of Georgiana filled the page beneath mocking verse. The lower line of the printed border broke near one corner, though the floor meant nothing to her yet. Another sheet had already passed into the crowd. No one laughed openly this time. They did something worse. They compared the printed ugliness with the living woman. Georgiana felt every glance strike without sound. Rupert took the handbill from Mr. Alderton. "Send men to every entrance," he said. "Buy every copy. Find the printer. Withdraw Miss Bramwell's work until this is settled." Georgiana looked at him. No. Rupert turned. Georgiana. It was the first time he had used before such an audience. Under other circumstances, it might have reached her heart. Now it sounded like the beginning of another decision made in her place. "The work remains," she said. "This image was made to injure you. Then hiding it won't make it harmless. I can stop the distribution. You can purchase paper. You can't purchase what people believe they have seen." Rupert lowered his voice, but the room remained silent enough to hear every word. "I won't allow this to hang beside your name. It already does. Then I'll remove you from it." The tenderness in the offer made the error more painful. He believed her completely. He also believed belief entitled him to choose the remedy. "You cannot defend my face by hiding it," she said. His expression changed. Georgiana turned to Mr. Alderton. "Please keep the counterfeit under your care. Keep the wrapper, label, string, and manifest together. Record that the parcel lacked my ribbon and monogram." Mr. Alderton nodded to the clerk. "My legitimate works remain on the wall," Georgiana continued. "Nothing is destroyed." Lionel gave a quiet laugh. "You intend to make an exhibition into an inquiry. Someone has already made it into an accusation." Rupert stepped nearer. "Let me protect you from this." Georgiana looked at him. Only 4 days earlier, she had said she could imagine accepting him after the review. That answer had depended upon the belief that he understood why her work had to remain hers. "I can't give you the answer we discussed while you are still deciding which truths I'm permitted to face," she said. The words landed between them without spectacle. Rupert absorbed them without defense. "What do you need from me? Do not buy silence. Do not remove my work. Do not destroy anything." His hand closed around the handbill, then loosened. "Agreed." Mr. Alderton closed the case and wrapped it in clean paper. As he lifted it beneath the lamp, the hinge turned toward Georgiana. A small crescent-shaped chip broke the blue enamel. She had drawn that exact flaw before delivering Cordelia's portrait. Her pulse steadied. Shame had wanted her to look away. Evidence rewarded her for looking closer. "Wait," Georgiana said. Mr. Alderton stopped. She pointed to the hinge. "Before you put it away, record that mark. Rain silvered the windows of Somerset House on the morning of the 8th June, and softened the noise of the Strand below. But it could not quiet the tension inside the Royal Academy Secretary's room." Mr. Alderton stood beside a locked cabinet with the committee key in his hand. 2 senior members of the Academy occupied the far side of the table. Lady Anne sat near Georgiana, while Rupert remained a measured distance behind her chair. Cordelia and Lionel stood together opposite them. A clerk waited beside the minute book, his pen already cut. The wrapped blue enamel case rested upon the table beside the brown wrapper, duplicate label, string, and carrier manifest retained from the previous day. Mr. Alderton lifted the parcel and turned it so everyone could see the secretary's seal. "The case has remained in this cabinet since yesterday afternoon," he said. "The key hasn't left my possession." The clerk recorded the statement. Mr. Alderton broke the seal and unfolded the paper. The blue case appeared beneath the grey morning light. Its crescent-shaped hinge chip clearly visible. Georgiana placed her commission sketch on the table. "This was made before the portrait left my possession," she said. "The dimensions, enamel color, and damage to the hinge are recorded here." One committee member leaned closer. He compared the small crescent on the drawing with the flaw in the case. "The position appears exact." Lionel gave a slight shrug. "Many cases are damaged. Many cases are blue," Georgiana replied. "Many are oval. That is why one mark isn't enough." Cordelia looked at the case without touching it. "It resembles mine." Mr. Alderton glanced toward the clerk. "Yesterday," Lady Cordelia said, "that case was stolen from Rothbury House." Cordelia lifted her chin. "Because I believed it was mine." "You also said it held the portrait Miss Bramwell painted of you," Georgiana said. "It did." "Then either this is your case, or it merely resembles your case. Which statement do you want recorded?" Lionel stepped in before his sister could answer. She was distressed. She recognized the enamel and spoke before she had time to consider every word. "Distress doesn't change ownership," Georgiana said. "Nor does it prove who placed the parcel under my name." Rupert's gaze settled on her. Approval moved through it, but he remained silent. Georgiana was not asking the committee to leap ahead of the facts. That discipline gave her greater authority than accusation would have done. Mr. Alderton opened the case. The counterfeit portrait of Rupert remained inside, unchanged. In the cold morning light, the false intimacy looked even more deliberate. The shadows around his collar had been deepened. Daylight had been altered into lamplight. Georgiana forced herself to look closely. Shame had already tried to make her turn away. She would not assist it. "The lining is new," she said. Cordelia's eyes shifted toward the black velvet. Lionel did not move. One committee member asked, "How can you tell?" "The casemaker fitted blue velvet before I delivered the portrait. I saw it when the plaque was secured." Georgiana indicated the corner near the clasp. "This black lining has been pressed over older adhesive. One edge has lifted." Cordelia spoke at once. "You'll damage the case." The speed of the objection drew every gaze toward her. She corrected herself. "If it is mine," Georgiana looked at her. "Yesterday you were certain enough to call it stolen." Cordelia's color rose. "I told the room what I believed." "To whom did you report the loss before the case appeared in my submission?" "My brother knew." "Did your father?" Cordelia hesitated. "It was a private matter. Did you inform the casemaker, a pawnbroker, or any tradesman who might encounter an object bearing your family mark?" "I didn't want a spectacle." Georgiana glanced at the counterfeit, yet its appearance beneath my name required one. Lionel's expression sharpened. "Miss Bramwell, you are not here to question my sister's feelings. No, I am here to identify an object." Georgiana turned to Mr. Alderton. "Will you lift the loose corner?" "I won't touch it. The committee must be able to say the discovery was not placed there by my hand." The two Academy members exchanged a look. The elder nodded. Mr. Alderton took a narrow ivory tool from a small case and slid its tip beneath the loosened velvet. The adhesive resisted, then released with a faint, dry sound. He raised only the width of a finger. Beneath the black lining, stamped into the silvered shell, appeared a stag beneath 3 stars, the Rothbury crest. The clerk stopped writing. Cordelia stared at the mark as though the case had betrayed her. Lionel recovered first. "That proves only that the case belonged to my sister." "Yes," Georgiana said. "Ownership, not yet authorship of the deception." Her refusal to overstate the proof unsettled him more than triumph would have done. One committee member bent nearer. The crest was deliberately covered. A thief might do that, Lionel said. A thief who wanted the case connected to me, but not traced to Rothbury House, Georgiana replied. Cordelia looked at the open case. The portrait was inside when it disappeared. Then where is it now? Georgiana asked. The thief removed it and preserved it. How should I know? You shouldn't, Georgina said, unless you know more about the removal than you have told us. Cordelia's fingers tightened around her reticule. I don't. Georgiana turned back to the table. Then the committee has established 3 facts. This is the case in which I delivered Lady Cordelia's portrait. The original blue lining was removed. The new black velvet concealed the Rothbury crest. Lionel's jaw tightened. And none of that proves I touched it. No, Georgiana said. It proves someone expected ownership to matter. Mr. Alderton lowered the velvet carefully, closed the case, and wrapped it again. The duplicate label, wrapper, string, and manifest remained separate. He applied fresh wax and returned the case to the locked cabinet. Cordelia and Lionel left first, accompanied by the 2 committee members. Cordelia did not look at Georgiana. Lionel did, and the cold calculation in his face revealed that he had not expected the crest to survive. When the door closed, Rupert approached only far enough to be heard without forcing privacy. Lady Anne remained beside Georgiana. Mr. Alderton and the clerk moved into the adjoining office, leaving the door open. Rupert looked at Georgiana. What do you need from me now? There was no apology prepared inside the question. No attempt to turn regret into a speech. Georgiana appreciated that. Mr. Alderton keeps the key. Agreed. No servant of yours touches the case, wrapper, label, manifest, or anything else the committee receives. Agreed. Your men may remain in the corridor if Mr. Alderton permits it. They may protect a witness from intimidation. They do not enter this room unless invited. Agreed. If another examination is held, I speak first. Rupert paused only long, enough to understand that she was giving him a place without giving him control. You speak first. And if I ask you to remain silent, you remain silent. The old Rupert might have mistaken silence for surrender. The man before her bowed his head. I will. Georgiana felt no sudden restoration of trust. Trust did not return, because a powerful man agreed to one boundary, yet his acceptance opened a narrow place where it might grow again. Then stand where no one can remove the evidence, she said. Leave the speaking to me. Rupert looked toward the locked cabinet, then back to her. That is where I'll stand. Across London, Elias Reed stopped before a print shop window on his way to Master Bell's workshop. One of the handbills had been pasted crookedly against the glass. Georgiana's caricature filled the center. In the lower corner, a small drawing showed the oval blue enamel case. Elias recognized the shape, the chipped hinge, and the mocking caption. Then he saw the broken line along the lower border. It matched the slip of Mercer's burin he had witnessed in the Fleet Street workroom. His attention moved to the copied likeness of Rupert. Even in crude print, the angle of the head came from the practice study that had lain beneath Mercer's hand. Lionel's words returned with sudden clarity. Samuel Pike, one small parcel. Elias stared at Georgiana's name beneath the caricature. She had found him work before she knew he had anything to offer. She had told him one accusation did not make every accusation true. He turned away from the window, forgot the hour Master Bell expected him, and began running toward Upper Brook Street. The case was empty when Lord Lionel brought it. Elias Reed spoke before the footman had fully closed the drawing-room door at Upper Brook Street. Rain darkened his coat, and the run from the print shop window had left him breathless. But fear had sharpened rather than scattered his memory. Georgiana stood near the centre table, with Lady Anne beside her. Rupert had accompanied them back from Somerset House and remained near the mantel, far enough away not to crowd the boy. "Tell me only what you saw and heard," Georgiana said. "Don't tell me what you think it means." Elias nodded. He clutched his cap in both hands. Lord Lionel brought the blue case to Mr. Mercer's workroom near Fleet Street. The portrait wasn't inside it. Lady Cordelia's likeness was on the bench, wrapped in pale blue linen. "You recognized her?" "Yes, the likeness was plain." "What were you asked to do?" "Remove the old blue velvet and replace it with black." His voice steadied as the order of events returned. "When I lifted the lining, I found the Rothbury crest stamped beneath it, a stag under 3 stars. Rupert's expression hardened. "And you said nothing?" The question came too sharply. Elias flinched. Rupert saw it at once and stepped back from the mantel. "That was badly asked," he said. "You are not accused, Mr. Reed. Why couldn't you come forward then?" Elias looked at Georgiana rather than at the Duke. "Lord Lionel said he would make Mr. Carow dismiss me. Mr. Carow depended on Rothbury payments. The next day he sent me away." "What else did you see?" Georgiana asked. "A pencil study of his Grace. The collar was loose. Mr. Mercer used it for the false miniature." Georgiana felt a cold recognition move through her. The quick study from Rupert's first sitting had rested near the edge of her delivery portfolio. She had not searched for it since. "Did you see who brought the drawing?" "No, miss. It was already there when I arrived." "And the handbill?" Mr. Mercer had begun the copperplate. His burin slipped and broke the lower border. "The same break is printed on the handbill." Elias swallowed. "Lord Lionel also said a carrier's assistant named Samuel Pike would add 1 small parcel. I heard the name clearly." Georgiana thought of the added manifest line and the initials SP. "Did he say where the parcel would go?" "Not directly. I didn't understand until I saw the handbill and your name beneath it." Rupert moved one hand, then stilled it before the impulse became intervention. "Why did you come here?" Lady Anne asked. Elias looked down at his wet boots. "Miss Bramwell helped me before she knew I could help her. She said one accusation didn't make every accusation true." He raised his eyes. "I thought that ought to apply to her too." The answer reached Georgiana more deeply than any declaration of loyalty could have done. She had not purchased his courage. She had only made truth feel less lonely. "You did the right thing by coming," she said. "Now we must make certain no one can say your memory changed to please us." Lady Anne sent for Mr. Alderton and Mr. Sayer. Rupert began to offer his own solicitor, then stopped himself. "Mine would look partial," he said. "Mr. Sayer is the better choice." Georgiana met his gaze. "Yes." Within the hour, Elias repeated his account before Lady Anne, Mr. Alderton, and Mr. Sayer. The solicitor asked short questions and refused speculation. Elias described the empty blue case, the hidden crest, the new black velvet, Cordelia's portrait in pale blue linen, Rupert's practice study, the broken border on the copperplate, Lionel's threat against Mr. Carow, and the name Samuel Pike. When Elias said he had heard only 1 small parcel rather than the destination, Mr. Sayer recorded that limitation exactly. The statement was read back slowly. Elias corrected the order in which Mercer had unfolded the study and the linen packet. Then he signed beneath the final line. Lady Anne, Mr. Alderton, and Mr. Sayer added their names as witnesses. Rupert remained near the window and asked nothing further. Mr. Sayer folded the paper and sealed it. "This gives us a witness to the preparation," he said. "It does not yet give us the missing portrait, the stolen study, or the plate. Then we go to Mercer's workroom, Georgiana said. Not tonight, Lady Anne replied. The property owner must open it, and Mr. Sayer must be present. Georgiana nodded. Tomorrow morning. Shortly after 8 on the 9th of June, the owner of the Fleet Street premises unlocked the shared workroom. Georgiana entered with Lady Anne, Mr. Sayer, Mr. Alderton, Master Bell, and Elias. Rupert waited in the outer passage until the owner looked toward him and said, "Your Grace may enter if you touch nothing." Agreed. The room looked abandoned rather than closed. A cup stood near the cold grate. Glue had hardened in an open pot. Copperplate shavings glittered on the central bench. Mr. Carrow's rented frame station at the rear had been cleared, but Mercer's tools remained in place. He left before dawn yesterday, the owner said. One valise. No message. Rent unpaid. Mr. Sayer instructed everyone to leave objects where they were until each could be listed. Georgiana clasped her hands to keep from reaching toward the nearest drawer. Every instinct of the artist urged her to examine. Evidence required patience. The first cabinet held pigments, blank ivory leaves, and frame fittings. The second contained rolled proofs and discarded paper. Behind them lay a pale blue linen packet wrapped in a trial printing. Mr. Sayer carried it to the cleared bench. Mr. Alderton unfolded the outer proof. A broken line interrupted the lower border in the same place Elias had described. Beneath the paper, the linen opened around Cordelia's legitimate portrait plaque. The painted face remained intact. The clear eyes and firm mouth looked exactly as Georgiana had rendered them. Lady Anne released a quiet breath. "Record the wrapping and the shelf," Georgiana said. Mr. Alderton entered both details into the inventory. In a lower drawer, the property owner found a folded sheet bearing graphite. Georgiana recognized the angle of Rupert's head before the paper was fully opened. The practice study from the 16th of May lay there with one corner creased and the collar lines darkened by tracing. Only then did she understand that it had been missing. The realization felt less like discovery than violation. Someone had taken a professional observation made in trust and turned it into a claim about private conduct. Rupert approached only after Mr. Sayer nodded. "May I see it?" he asked. "From there," Georgiana said. He obeyed. His gaze moved over the copied pose, then to her face. He offered no assurance that could make the theft smaller. Another stack of proofs yielded the caricature of Georgiana and a trial impression from the same plate. The lower border carried the identical break. The copper plate itself was not on the bench, in the cabinets, or beneath the press. "He took it," Master Bell said. "Or hid it," Elias replied. Mr. Sayer opened Mercer's account book. One entry, dated the 4th June, recorded payment to S. Pike for delivery assistance. Beneath it appeared smaller charges for duplicate labels, paper, and sealing string. Mr. Alderton listed the page without removing it from the book. Tucked inside the rear cover, the property owner found an unpaid lodging receipt bearing a Southwark address and the name Edmund Mercer. "He did not flee without direction," Georgiana said. Mr. Sayer folded the receipt into his document case. "No, Debs often keep a better record than men." Each recovered object was wrapped separately. Mr. Sayer dictated the description. Mr. Alderton confirmed it. The owner signed the inventory. Wax was placed across every fold, and initials were written through each seal. The portrait, practice study, proofs, account book, and lodging receipt were carried directly to Mr. Alderton's locked cabinet at Somerset House. No servant of Rupert's touched them. Before leaving the workroom, Georgiana looked once at the empty place where the copper plate should have been. The case connected Rothbury House to the counterfeit. Elias connected Lionel to the workroom. The account connected Pike to the false delivery. Yet Mercer and the plate remained beyond reach. Outside, Rupert offered Georgiana his arm. She considered it, then rested her hand lightly upon his sleeve. He did not close his fingers over hers. "Do you believe now that I had meant to court you before Rothbury's dinner?" he asked. Georgiana looked toward the waiting carriage. "Your feelings were never the only question." "What is the question? Whether you can love a woman Hubsey's voice may be inconvenient to you." Rupert absorbed the answer without defense. "May I continue walking beside you?" "You already are." "May I continue tomorrow?" Georgiana looked at Mr. Sayre's document case, where the Southwark's receipt waited like an open door. "Yes," she said. "If you remember that beside is not the same as before." Rupert bowed his head. "I'll remember." Behind them, the workroom was locked again. Ahead, the Southwark address remained the only path to the man who had fled with the last hidden instrument of the lie. Mr. Sayre found Edmund Mercer on the 10th June in a narrow Southwark lodging where the rent was low. The windows faced a brick wall, and privacy depended upon no one caring enough to ask questions. The unpaid receipt from the Fleet Street account book had supplied the address. The lodging keeper supplied the room after learning that Mercer had arrived with one valise, paid for 2 nights, and spent most of the first behind a locked door. Mr. Sayre brought no constable and no servant bearing the Duke's colours. He came with his clerk, the lodging keeper, and a copy of Elias Reed's witnessed statement. Mercer opened the door only after the keeper threatened to remove it from the hinges. He looked older than he had 4 days earlier. Ink marked his cuffs. His valise lay open upon the bed, packed with clothes, 2 engraving tools, and enough coin to prove someone had paid him to disappear, but not enough to keep him gone. "I've nothing to say," Mercer told Mr. Sayre. "Then you may listen." The solicitor remained near the door. "Lord Lionel Rothbury has denied responsibility. If this matter proceeds without your declaration, every object recovered from your workroom points toward you." Mercer's face tightened. "He paid for the work. Can you prove it?" "He used coin." "Then the coin proves only that you were paid." Mr. Sayre placed Elias's statement upon the table. The apprentice saw Lord Lionel bring the case, Lady Cordelia's portrait, and Miss Bramwell's study. The carrier account names Samuel Pike. If Lord Lionel decides you acted alone, society will find that explanation convenient. Mercer looked toward the valise. He said no one would look beyond Miss Bramwell. He was wrong, and if I sign, I can't promise mercy that isn't mine to grant. I can say you cooperated before the civil claims were settled. I can also prevent Lord Lionel from placing his entire design upon you without contradiction. Self-preservation succeeded where conscience had failed. Mercer sat. His first account wandered through excuses until Mr. Sayre stopped him. "Tell me what you saw, what you did, and what Lord Lionel instructed." By the end, the declaration was precise. Lionel had brought the empty blue-enamel case, Cordelia's portrait wrapped in pale blue linen, and Georgiana's stolen practice study. He had ordered the counterfeit miniature, the caricature on the reverse, the handbills, the duplicate label, and the use of Samuel Pike. He had told Mercer that Cordelia supplied the case and wished her own portrait preserved, though Mercer had never heard that instruction from Cordelia herself. He also admitted hiding the copperplate in a locked press after Lionel warned that the workroom might be searched. Mr. Sayre's clerk read the declaration back. Mercer corrected one date and signed. The lodging keeper and clerk witnessed the signature. On the morning of the 11th June, Mercer's key opened the locked press at Fleet Street. The copper plate lay beneath unpaid accounts, its lower border broken in the same place as every recovered handbill. Mr. Alderton and the property owner watched while it was listed, wrapped, sealed, and carried to Somerset House. Samuel Pike proved less difficult to locate. His employer summoned him to the carrier's office and placed the manifest before him. The added line bore his initials. Beside it lay the duplicate label and brown wrapper under Mr. Alderton's seal. Pike denied the bribe until Mr. Sayer showed him Mercer's declaration and the account entry recording payment to S. Pike. Then his confidence collapsed. I didn't know what was inside. You knew it didn't belong to Miss Bramwell, Mr. Sayer replied. Pike stared at the manifest. Lord Lionel said no one would question one small parcel. His written statement confirmed that Lionel had supplied the label, ordered the edition on the 4th of June, and paid half before the delivery and half after. The carrier dismissed him before sunset for falsifying the manifest. By breakfast on the 12th June, Georgiana possessed nearly every fact needed to clear her name, and London had already found a second lie. The new handbill did not claim she had painted the counterfeit. It accused her of purchasing Elias Reed's testimony with employment. By 9 o'clock, 2 notes had arrived at Upper Brook Street. One patron withdrew a commission for his wife's miniature. Another asked for the return of a deposit until the scandal became less public. Georgiana sat at her studio desk with the ledger open and calculated what the first withdrawal had already cost. Prepared ivory, 2 pigments ordered from a colour merchant, a silver clasp made to the sitter's measurements. The numbers were small by aristocratic standards and exact enough to wound. Lady Anne stood near the window, holding the handbill between 2 fingers. You may charge him for the materials. He'll refuse. Then he may refuse in writing. Georgiana closed the ledger. The money isn't the worst part. No, Lady Anne looked at the caricature. They have learned that evidence will defeat the first accusation. Now they mean to make kindness itself appear corrupt. Georgiana opened the lower compartment of her walnut paint box. The faded velvet packet lay inside. For a moment, she considered unfolding the unfinished self-portrait. Then she closed the compartment again. She could not bear another face, waiting to be defined by someone else's judgment. A carriage stopped outside. Cordelia descended in grey, dressed for injured restraint rather than mourning. Rupert's carriage arrived moments later. Whether by chance or vigilance, Georgiana did not know. The 4 of them met in Lady Anne's drawing-room beneath the discipline of full daylight. Cordelia sat with her hands folded. I came because this has gone too far. It went too far when my name was placed upon a false parcel, Georgiana said. Cordelia's gaze shifted toward Rupert before returning to her. I had no part in the carrier. You gave the case to your brother. I gave him an object I no longer wished to keep, knowing he meant to harm me. Cordelia's mouth tightened. I knew he intended to correct an insult to my family. By inventing one against mine, there is still a way to end this privately. At whose expense? Return the case. Withdraw the accusation against Lionel. Let Mr. Mercer bear responsibility for the handbills. And Elias? Cordelia hesitated, a confused apprentice who misunderstood what he saw. Georgiana looked at her. You came to ask me to abandon a boy because he told the truth. I came to prevent further humiliation. Whose? Cordelia stood. You will lose more commissions, perhaps. Georgiana touched the closed ledger. Whatever remains will still be mine. Cordelia turned toward Rupert. Expecting rank to correct the woman before her, he gave her nothing. "You have placed His Grace in an impossible position," she said. "No," Georgiana replied. "I asked him not to make mine disappear." Cordelia left without another word. Rupert picked up the second handbill and read it in silence. "I can answer this by noon," he said. Georgiana looked at him. "How?" "A statement under my seal. I will declare the miniature false, confirm your innocence, and make it clear that anyone repeating the accusation repeats it against my authority. Then the question becomes whether London fears you more than it believes Lionel. My authority will prevail. That is the problem." Rupert lowered the handbill. "You would rather let them continue injuring you." "I would rather prove the truth than borrow your certainty." Frustration crossed his face, but he did not turn it into command. "What do you intend? A special private view at Somerset House?" Lady Anne came closer. "That room will not be kind. It was not kind when I had only accusation. Now I have proof." Georgiana looked from Lady Anne to Rupert. "The purpose will be narrow. We prove the case came from Rothbury House. We prove Lionel arranged the false parcel. We protect Elias from the claim that his testimony was bought." Rupert considered the plan. "I can prevent pressure from reaching the committee." "Do that." "I can place men at the doors, only to prevent intimidation or removal of objects." "Agreed. No statement under your seal." His jaw tightened. "Agreed." Georgiana saw the cost of the promise and valued the obedience more than the ease. "There is one more question," Rupert said. "Where do you want me? At Somerset House? In the room before you, beside you, or absent?" At Rothbury House, he had stood before her without asking. At the review, he had tried to remove her from the scandal. Now he offered positions as a choice. "Beside me," Georgiana said. "Silent until I ask." Rupert bowed his head. "Then that is where I'll be." That afternoon, Mr. Alderton confirmed the special private view for the 15th June. Before sunset, one invitation reached Rothbury House. Cordelia broke the seal in Lionel's presence and read the list of objects to be shown. The original portrait, the blue-enamel case, the practice study, the copper plate, the manifest, the witnessed declarations. Her hand tightened around the paper when she reached the final line. For the first time since the scheme began, she understood that Georgiana did not intend merely to survive the image they had made of her. She intended to place it beside the truth and make London choose with its eyes open. By 11 o'clock on the 15th of June, the special private view at Somerset House had gathered exactly the people Georgiana most wished to avoid and most needed to face. Artists stood beside patrons who had withdrawn commissions from her 3 days earlier. Members of the Royal Academy Committee occupied the front of the room near a long table covered in green baize. Several guests from Rothbury House had come as well, including 2 women who had watched Lionel call Georgiana ugly and then lowered their eyes rather than object. They now examined the room with the solemn interest of people, determined to remember justice more clearly than cowardice. The Earl of Rothbury stood near the committee, with Cordelia on one side and Lionel on the other. Elias Reed waited beside Master Bell, pale but upright. Lady Anne entered with Georgiana on her arm. Georgiana wore dark blue silk without jewels. She had chosen neither mourning grey nor bridal white. She would not dress as a victim, and she would not permit Rupert's public proposal to define the mourning before she spoke. Rupert stood where she had asked him to stand, beside her, half a pace behind. His formal black coat and the response of the room made his rank unmistakable, but he wore no ornament intended to turn authority into spectacle. His hands were empty. Mr. Alderton held the cabinet key. "Are you ready?" Lady Anne asked quietly. Georgiana looked toward the table. The carrier manifest, brown wrapper, duplicate label, string, commission sketch, and sealed blue enamel case had been arranged beneath Mr. Alderton's supervision. Other recovered objects remained covered at the far end, reserved until they were needed. "I am." Mr. Alderton closed the doors and requested silence. "This private view has been convened by the committee to determine how an unauthorized parcel entered Miss Bramwell's submission, and whether the objects within it belonged to her work." He had barely finished when Lionel stepped forward. "Before this performance proceeds, perhaps someone should explain why a public institution has surrendered its rooms to the Duke of Wexborough's private revenge." Heads turned toward Rupert. He did not move. Lionel waited, then smiled. "No answer, Your Grace." Rupert remained silent. Georgiana felt the discipline in that silence. Every instinct in him urged response. He let the insult pass because she had asked him to. Lionel mistook restraint for weakness. "How convenient," he continued. "His Grace gathers artists, servants, tradesmen, and frightened patrons into one room, then stands aside while Miss Bramwell calls it truth." "The committee issued the invitations," Georgiana said. Lionel turned toward her. "At the request of a disappointed woman who discovered that scandal attracts attention more quickly than talent." A murmur moved through the room. One former patron glanced toward Georgiana's 3 miniatures, still displayed under her own name along the side wall. Georgiana did not defend her character. Lionel wanted her to argue about dignity, jealousy, and gratitude. Objects had no vanity to provoke and no rank to fear. "Mr. Alderton," she said, "please begin with the delivery record." The secretary unfolded the carrier manifest beneath a sheet of glass. Miss Bramwell's original delivery consisted of 3 framed miniatures, 1 leather portfolio, and 1 small box of display fittings. These entries were made by the carrier clerk after the items were checked at Upper Brook Street. He pointed lower on the page. A separate line reading 1 small parcel was added later. It bears the initials SP. "Those initials belong to Samuel Pike," Georgiana said. "His witnessed statement confirms that he added the parcel after the cart reached the carrier yard." Lionel gave a quiet laugh, a dismissed assistant protecting himself. Mr. Alderton placed the duplicate label beside the manifest. The parcel bore Miss Bramwell's name and direction, but it lacked the grey studio ribbon and painted monogram used on every legitimate item. "A ribbon proves nothing," Lionel said. "No," Georgiana replied. "Its absence proves only that the parcel was not wrapped in my studio. The altered manifest proves it joined the delivery later, or that you wished it to appear so. Then I would have needed access to the carrier yard, Mr. Pike, and a label prepared in advance." Lionel's gaze sharpened. "You employed an apprentice who claims to have seen whatever best serves you." Georgiana turned slightly toward Elias, then back to Lionel. "I introduced Mr. Reed to Master Bell on the 5th of June. The false parcel was not opened until the 7th June. Master Bell's ledger records the date." Master Bell lifted a small account book. "It does? A fortunate kindness," Lionel said. "Kindness often appears suspicious to people who offer it only when useful." Several faces shifted away from him. Georgiana saw Elias breathe more steadily. She did not ask him to speak. His testimony would be used when it could prove something, not paraded merely to display his fear. "The parcel itself," she said. Mr. Alderton took the wrapped object from a locked case beneath the table. He turned it so the committee could see the unbroken wax applied after the examination on the 8th June. Then he broke the seal and unfolded the paper. The blue-enamel case appeared beneath the lamps. The crescent-shaped chip near the hinge caught the light. Cordelia moved before she could stop herself. One step. No more. Georgiana saw it. So did her father. "That is my property," Cordelia said. The words entered the room before caution could retrieve them. Georgiana looked at her. "Your property?" Cordelia's hand tightened around her reticule. "It resembles the case that was taken from Rothbury House." Mr. Alderton opened the minute book. On the 7th of June, Lady Cordelia stated that the case had been stolen, and that it contained the portrait painted by Miss Bramwell. On the 8th of June, she said only that it resembled her case. Cordelia lifted her chin. "I was distressed. Were you distressed when you carried it to Lady Hester Vale's supper on the 25th May? Georgiana asked. "Several people saw it in your hand." Cordelia's eyes moved toward the guests from that evening. Lady Hester stood near the second row and gave the smallest nod. "I carried my portrait," Cordelia said. "Inside this case?" "Yes." The admission changed the room. Georgiana placed her commission sketch beside the blue enamel. This drawing was made before delivery. It records the dimensions, the enamel color, and the crescent-shaped defect at the hinge. One committee member leaned close to compare the mark. "The position is exact." Lionel stepped nearer. "A damaged case can be copied." Then the copyist reproduced a flaw no one outside the fitting room had reason to record, Georgiana said, and Lady Cordelia has just confirmed she possessed it after delivery. Possession is not conspiracy. No, Georgiana held his gaze. "That is why we are still examining the object." Mr. Alderton opened the case. The counterfeit miniature of Rupert appeared against the black velvet. A few guests looked away, though many had studied its printed likeness in the Strand without discomfort. Georgiana waited until their eyes returned. "The original lining was blue," she said. "This black velvet was added after Lady Cordelia's portrait had been removed." Cordelia spoke quickly. "You'll damage it." "Mr. Alderton will not remove the lining," Georgiana said. "He will lift only the corner already loose." Lionel moved toward the table. Rupert stepped between him and the evidence with one quiet motion. He did not touch Lionel. He did not speak. His presence was enough to stop him. Georgiana did not look back, but she felt the difference between protection and possession. Rupert defended the boundary she had set, not the conclusion he wished the room to accept. Mr. Alderton inserted a narrow ivory tool beneath the loosened velvet near the clasp. The adhesive released with a faint, dry sound. He raised the lining only the width of a finger. Beneath it appeared a stag under 3 stars, stamped clearly into the silvered metal, the Rothbury crest. Silence moved through the room, deeper than gossip and colder than surprise. Cordelia stared at the mark. Lionel's face became still. The Earl of Rothbury looked first at the crest, then at his daughter. "Cordelia," he said, "when did this case leave your hands?" Cordelia looked at her father, then at the crest beneath the lifted velvet, and for one suspended moment, the entire room seemed to wait upon the discipline she had worn all her life. "I don't remember the exact day," she said. "The case disappeared after Lady Hester's supper." The Earl's face did not change. "That was not my question." Cordelia's fingers tightened around her reticule. "I told you it was taken." "You told no one until it appeared beneath Miss Bramwell's name," Georgiana said. Cordelia turned toward her. "Because I had no wish to make the loss public. Yet you have just claimed the case as your property before every person in this room." Lionel stepped forward, but Rupert remained between him and the evidence table. He did not touch him. He only held the boundary Georgiana had established. "My sister is distressed," Lionel said. "She has already answered." "No," the Earl replied. "She has avoided answering." Georgiana looked toward Mr. Alderton. "The original portrait, please." The secretary crossed to the covered end of the table and uncovered a small easel. Cordelia's legitimate likeness stood beneath the lamps, the clear eyes and firm mouth unchanged. A murmur moved through the guests before dying under the Earl's stare. "This was found on the 9th of June in Edmund Mercer's Fleet Street workroom," Mr. Alderton said. "It was wrapped in pale blue linen and discarded proof paper. The property owner, Mr. Sayer, Master Bell, and I witnessed the recovery." Cordelia's face lost colour. Georgiana turned to Elias. "Mr. Reed, did you see this portrait before the handbills appeared?" Elias stepped forward beside Master Bell. His voice trembled only on the first word. "I did. Lord Lionel brought it to the workroom in pale blue linen." Lionel gave a short laugh. "The boy was dismissed and then rewarded with employment by Miss Bramwell." "On what date?" Georgiana asked. Master Bell opened his ledger. "1st of June. The counterfeit parcel was not opened until the 7th, Georgiana said. "Mr. Reed had no scandal to exploit when I introduced him to Master Bell." Lionel's mouth tightened. "A fortunate kindness." "Kindness isn't evidence of corruption, merely because you cannot imagine it without advantage." Several patrons lowered their eyes. Georgiana did not allow the silence to linger. The study. Mr. Alderton placed the recovered pencil drawing beside the counterfeit. Rupert's head appeared at the same angle in both. The quick lines of the practice sketch showed a loosened collar and daylight across one cheek. In the false miniature, the cravat had vanished, the coat had opened, and daylight had been converted into suggestive lamplight. "This study was made during His Grace's first sitting," Georgiana said. "It was taken from my delivery portfolio without my knowledge and found in Mercer's workroom beside Lady Cordelia's portrait." Mr. Sayer lifted Mercer's witnessed declaration. "Mr. Mercer states that Lord Lionel delivered the case, the portrait, and the study. He ordered the counterfeit likeness, the caricature, and the handbills. He also supplied the duplicate label and the name of Samuel Pike." Lionel looked toward Cordelia. "Mercer is a debtor saving himself." "Then we may consider the work of his hands," Georgiana said. Mr. Alderton uncovered the copperplate and placed one preserved handbill beside it. The lower printed border broke at the same point on both. Elias looked at the mark, but did not speak until Georgiana nodded. "I saw the burin slip," he said. "Lord Lionel told Mr. Mercer to leave the break." "And the parcel?" the Earl asked. Mr. Sayer placed Pike's statement beside the manifest. "Samuel Pike admits that Lord Lionel paid him to add one small parcel after Miss Bramwell's legitimate delivery reached the carrier yard. His initials appear beside the added line." Lionel looked from the plate to the manifest, then toward the doors. Rupert did not move, but the men stationed in the corridor were visible through the narrow opening. They guarded the room, not the conclusion. "Whatever I arranged," Lionel said. Cordelia knew nothing of the carrier. Cordelia turned toward him. "Lionel." He had defended himself by separating her guilt from his own. The Earl looked at his daughter. "Did you remove your portrait from this case?" "No, the denial came too quickly." Georgiana did not raise her voice. "At Lady Hester's supper, you carried the portrait inside the blue case. On the 7th of June, you said the stolen case still held it. Today, the portrait stands here, recovered from the same workroom where the counterfeit was made." Cordelia's breath shortened. A thief could have removed it. Did you? The Earl asked. Father, I only wanted the likeness altered. Did you remove it? Cordelia stared at the painted face. The expression she had called hard now looked composed in a way she could no longer imitate. I took it out, she whispered. No one moved. Did you give the case to Lionel? Yes. The word broke from her, but I didn't know about the carrier. I didn't know how he would place it under her name. Lionel's face became still. The Earl's voice hardened. What did you know? Cordelia looked at Georgiana, but only for a moment. I knew he meant to make London see her differently. Why? Georgiana asked. Cordelia's gaze returned to the legitimate portrait. You made me look hard. I painted the expression you gave me. Everyone praised you for refusing me. Her control began to fracture in small places rather than all at once. You refused my money. You refused his protection. He kept returning to you. The last sentence emerged with more pain than accusation. You were supposed to understand what his notice was worth. Georgiana felt the old humiliation stir beneath her skin. Lionel's dinner table insult, the laughter near the evidence table, the handbills that invited London to compare her living face with a caricature. Yet none of it governed the room now. You did not fear my face, she said. You feared that I could name what I saw. Cordelia closed her eyes. The Earl looked away from his daughter, and the movement held more condemnation than any raised voice could have done. Lionel attempted one final defense. Cordelia's vanity does not prove I intended permanent harm. The handbills were a social jest, carried too far. A patron who had withdrawn his commission shifted visibly at the word jest. Georgiana turned toward Rupert. Your Grace. He stepped from behind her, but not ahead. I knew Miss Bramwell before the dinner at Rothbury House, he said. The room quieted with the instinctive attention rank commanded. I had intended to seek Lady Anne's permission to court her before Lord Lionel spoke. My proposal was not pity. His gaze settled on Georgiana. Its manner was still wrong. I made my certainty public and placed her freedom beneath the judgment of a room. He paused. When the counterfeit appeared, I believed her. I then attempted to withdraw her work, purchase the handbills, and destroy the false image. I called that protection. It was another decision made without her consent. Lionel's expression sharpened as though the confession offered him an opening. It did not. Rupert's authority became stronger because he used it against his own pride. Miss Bramwell owes me neither marriage nor forgiveness, he said. What has been established today belongs to her courage, her judgment, and the witnesses who chose truth despite the cost. Mr. Alderton rose on behalf of the committee. The Royal Academy will retain Miss Bramwell's legitimate works on display under her name. A notice will be issued stating that the unauthorized parcel was added after her submission, left Upper Brook Street, and that the counterfeit was not her work. Any future submission connected to Mr. Mercer's fraud will be refused. Mr. Sayer spoke next, his tone practical rather than triumphant. The Earl of Rothbury has agreed to fund a separate retraction for the households and patrons who received the handbills to settle Lady Cordelia's unpaid commission and to reimburse Miss Bramwell's documented losses. The Earl inclined his head. Shame had aged him, but he did not hide behind it. He turned to Lionel. You will surrender the family accounts before sunset. You will resign from your clubs before their committees are required to act. Tomorrow, you will leave London for Ashdown Farm and remain there until I decide otherwise. Lionel's face hardened. You would exile your son on the word of tradesmen? No, the Earl said. On the evidence of your conduct. He looked at Cordelia. "You will withdraw from the season and go to Bath with your aunt." Cordelia did not argue. Edmund Mercer would return the portion of Lionel's payment still in his possession. The patrons who had used him through academy introductions would be informed of the fraud. Samuel Pike had already been dismissed for falsifying the manifest. Master Bell stated that Elias's apprenticeship would continue and that no Rothbury pressure would alter it after the committee examination ended. The case, counterfeit, copperplate, labels, manifest, and witnessed declarations would pass from Mr. Alderton's care to Mr. Sayer until the retraction and payments were complete. No one applauded. Georgiana was grateful. Applause would have turned justice into another entertainment. Instead, the room changed through smaller signs. The patron who had withdrawn his wife's commission approached with visible discomfort. "Miss Bramwell, I hope you might reconsider." Georgiana looked at him steadily. "Does your wife still wish to be painted by me?" "She does." "Then she may write to me herself." He bowed and accepted the condition. Lady Hester came next, but offered no grand praise. She only touched Georgiana's hand and said, "Your work remained honest. Society has finally been forced to look properly." The room thinned. The Earl left with Cordelia. Lionel departed under his father's direction without looking back. Elias remained beside Master Bell, standing straighter than when he had entered. At last, only Lady Anne, the committee, Rupert, and Georgiana remained near the wall where her 3 miniatures still hung beneath her name. Rupert did not approach until she turned toward him. "May I send my card tomorrow?" he asked. There was no proposal hidden inside the question, no claim upon the victory, only permission requested and an answer left free. Georgiana looked at the man who had finally learned that standing beside her did not require taking the room from her. "You may," she said. Rupert's card arrived the next morning with no flowers, no declaration, and no assumption that yesterday's justice had restored what his earlier mistakes had damaged. Beneath his name, he had written, "May I call on Thursday at 4?" Georgiana answered yes. From 16th June onward, their courtship resumed in measured steps. He visited Upper Brook Street under Lady Anne's watch, walked with Georgiana in Hyde Park, when the paths were sufficiently public, and attended 2 small suppers where he allowed other men to disagree with her, without treating disagreement as insult. The Royal Academy notice appeared within the week. It stated that the unauthorized parcel had been added after Georgiana's submission left her house, that the counterfeit was not her work, and that her legitimate miniatures remained accepted under her own name. The Earl of Rothbury paid the overdue commission and the losses recorded in her ledger. He also sent written retractions to the households known to have received the handbills. Lionel surrendered the family accounts and left London. Cordelia withdrew to Bath with her aunt. No apology came from either of them. Georgiana discovered that closure did not require repentance from people who had valued control more than truth. Elias remained with Master Bell, and advanced quickly once fear no longer occupied half his attention. Edmund Mercer returned what remained of Lionel's payment and signed the final civil acknowledgments prepared by Mr. Sayer. Samuel Pike did not return to the carrier's employment. The blue-enamel case, counterfeit, copperplate, manifest, labels and declarations remained in Mr. Sayer's custody until every settlement term was completed. Cordelia's true portrait was eventually returned to the Earl, wrapped separately and never placed back inside the case that had been used to accuse its maker. Through all of it, Rupert kept the place Georgiana had given him. Beside, not before. The test came on the 20th July. A note from Lady Beatrice Halford arrived before breakfast, inviting Rupert to a political dinner and referring twice to Georgiana as the future Duchess of Wexborough. Lady Beatrice assumed Georgiana would attend. She also assumed Georgiana would abandon the commission, sitting already entered in her ledger. Rupert brought the note to Upper Brook Street that afternoon. Georgiana read it in the drawing room while Lady Anne pretended to study a book near the window. "She has invited a woman who doesn't yet exist," Georgiana said. "Lady Beatrice has always preferred certainty to accuracy. The sitting cannot be moved. My patron leaves London the next morning. Then you should keep it." Georgiana looked at him. "You are expected at the dinner." "I am. Without me, people will speculate. They have demonstrated considerable skill at it. You wanted me there." Rupert's expression remained open. "Yes. And you are disappointed." "Yes." She waited. The old impulse might have persuaded, arranged, or turned disappointment into obligation. Rupert folded Lady Beatrice's note once and placed it on the table. "Your work does not become less yours because my duties are inconvenient. I will attend alone. You will keep the commission. Lady Beatrice may learn that an invitation is not a summons." Lady Anne lowered her book just enough to conceal a smile. Georgiana studied Rupert's face. "You did not even offer to move the dinner. It is not mine to move. Nor is your sitting. You have improved. I live in hope that one day you will say that without sounding astonished. Do not become ambitious. Too late." Later, with Lady Anne walking several paces behind, Georgiana led him into the small garden behind the house. Lavender edged the path, and the late afternoon light rested warmly on the brick wall. Rupert stopped beneath the pear tree where the branches gave more shade than fruit. "I have been thinking about what marriage to you would require," he said. "That sounds dangerously like a contract." "It will include one, but I mean what it requires of me." Georgiana waited. "I cannot promise never to be proud, impatient, or wrong," he continued. "I can promise that I will not call control love. Your work will remain yours. Your income will remain yours. Your refusals will remain yours. I may dislike them. I may argue you. I will not convert disappointment into authority." He drew a breath. "I have loved your judgment when it favored me, and feared it when it did not. I want to become a man who honors both." Georgiana felt the truth of the words because they asked nothing from her in return. Rupert did not kneel. He did not reach for her. He stood where she could see him clearly and leave freely. "May I propose?" he asked. The question brought her back to Rothbury House, to the dining table, to the room that had once held her answer hostage. This time there was no insult governing the moment. No audience waited to turn her choice into a lesson. Even Lady Anne had stopped beyond hearing. "You may," Georgiana said. Rupert's restraint broke only in his eyes. "Georgiana Bramwell, will you marry me?" She let the silence belong to herself before answering. "Yes." His breath left him slowly. "May I take your hand?" Georgiana held it out. Only then did he touch her. Nearly 2 weeks passed before the engagement was announced. Mr. Sayer reviewed the proposed marriage settlement with Lady Anne and Georgiana before Rupert's trustees approved it. The terms placed Georgiana's existing income, artistic materials, commissions, and future earnings to her separate use through trustees. No household demand could compel her to accept a sitter, alter a likeness, surrender her studio, or place her work under another name. Rupert read every clause and added only one request. The studio at Langford House should have the north light she prefers. Mr. Sayer looked over his spectacles. "That is not usually a matter for trustees." then it should be a matter for builders. The principal terms were signed before the engagement appeared in the newspapers. Banns were called on 2, 9, and the 16th of August. On the 20th of August, Georgiana married Rupert in the parish church near Upper Brook Street, with Lady Anne beside her and the Dowager Duchess watching from the first pew. Georgiana wore ivory silk without excessive ornament. Rupert wore formal mourning dress and no expression of triumph. When he placed the ring upon her hand, he did so with the solemnity of a man accepting responsibility rather than acquiring possession. By September, the north room at Langford House had become a working studio. Georgiana's name remained on the door ledger and beneath every finished miniature. Clients entered by appointment. Payments were recorded in her own books. Some visitors still looked surprised when the Duchess of Wexborough greeted them with a paint stain on one finger. Georgiana allowed them the burden of their surprise. One quiet afternoon, she opened the faded velvet packet from her walnut box and placed the unfinished self-portrait beneath the light. Rupert sat near the window, reading correspondence, close enough to remain, and far enough not to intrude. Georgiana kept the eyes her mother had painted 11 years earlier. She did not soften the mouth. She did not narrow the face or make it younger. She painted the woman who had endured being misnamed, publicly rescued, publicly doubted, and finally permitted to define herself. When the last color settled, Rupert closed his letter. "Is it finished?" "Yes." He approached only after she nodded. The completed face looked neither pretty nor plain. It looked alert, composed, and entirely alive. "Where will you hang it?" he asked. Georgiana glanced toward the miniature she had painted of him. It rested inside a dark green case on the mantel. Her own new case was deep blue, equal in size and workmanship. "There," she said. Rupert placed the two cases side by side, neither above the other. He looked at his portrait, then at hers. "A woman who finished her own face," he said. Georgiana rested her hand lightly over his, and a man who learned to ask. In the September light, the two truthful faces remained open beside one another, seen without disguise and chosen without surrender.